The most interesting thing that I can tell you about the whole freedom of speech issue in Canada is that the government, a political party now conservative in nature, has been told by its constituents in its own annual general meeting that overwhelmingly they were in favor of abolishing Section 13(1) of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which is the section that makes it a crime, in effect, an offense, to express anything that might expose someone to hatred or contempt or even ridicule on the basis of race, religion, ethnic origin, sex, sexual orientation, etc. All these criterion of protected groups have been basically living a life of luxury without criticism, primarily because the government refuses to act. And if Mr. Harper refuses to be a conservative, then someone should replace him who will be a conservative and preserve free speech. But in the meantime, there's something you could do, and I would like to suggest you do it, and that is to write to the Honorable Robert Nicholson, who is, after all, the Minister of Justice responsible for this act. And he is at 248 Wellington Street, that's the House of Commons, at 248 Wellington Street, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, K1AOH8. That last 6 letters and numbers, K1AOH8, are the postal code numbers. Why is it that they should abolish Section 13(1) of the Canadian Human Rights Act? Well, first of all, it was amended after September 11th in the hysteria that followed in an attempt to eliminate the possibility that anyone could be a terrorist on the internet, which has nothing to do with merely expressing your opinion about those taboo topics. Now it applies to the internet and to all forms of communication on it, whether from within Canada or not, even from the United States. It also applies to all mainstream media, as Maclean's magazine found out in the case involving Mark Steyn. And it applies for even controversial comments on those taboo topics. It is, of course, the internet which is designed and created to avoid censorship and to avoid nuclear attack, in fact, so that all points of view and all ideas can be expressed. And the important thing about the internet is that it's voluntarily accessible. In other words, nobody forces you to go anywhere on the internet and look at anything. It's a matter of your personal choice where you go and what you want to look at. You have to search and retrieve any dissident messages that are there. They're never imposed on anyone. What they're trying to do is prevent dissident messages. And there's also no defense in the Act, in that section, for discussing, for example, race, religion, or ethnic origin in relation to a wide variety of subjects, in, for example, incest, or, for example, celibacy. These are sexual orientations that may or may not be morally justified, and you're not allowed to express opinions about them. But what we'd like to tell you is that the majority of Canadians are able to think for themselves and are otherwise, in a democracy, entrusted with many onerous choices, such as voting, or abortion, or religious affiliation or non-affiliation, driving, walking, reading, speaking, and thinking for ourselves. And we're also responsible for the education and raising of our own children. So if we have all those choices between abortion on the one hand and voting on the other, which are fairly serious choices, why would we not have the ability to decide for ourselves what we should think about those taboo topics? Another thing about Section 13(1) that you have to understand and express to Mr. Nicholson in your letter is it allows no defense for a bona fide religious opinion or an honest opinion based on true facts, like fair comment. It doesn't allow that. And it allows no defense of truth, and it allows no one to express any defense of another ethnic group. For example, if the Eskimos were to say that white men eliminated their culture, that would not be a defense even if it was true. And it's not a defense if it's directed at, quote, white men. Although I'm sure that being the group that would be least likely to be offended, you're not likely to find any complaints on that score. So it's very political. So there's no defense of truth, no defense of religious opinion, no defense of fair comment available under the Act. And it's insulting to our intelligence to believe that we should delegate to government the ability to basically decide what we should be able to hear on any of those topics. And it's obvious that that's what's going to happen and is happening. And we should demand that the Minister of Justice immediately or as soon as possible, introduce legislation to repeal Section 13(1) of the Canadian Human Rights Act, because it is an unreasonable limit on our inherent and solemn rights to freedom of expression and freedom to hear. Those are my views, but I hope you share them. I hope you'll do something. I hope you will write to Robert Nicholson, who is the Minister of Justice at the House of Commons. I don't think it even needs a stamp. 284 Wellington Street, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, K1A0H8. That should be something we should all be doing. I'm going to prepare a petition, and it's going to be available to those who want it to distribute and to get signatures upon, to forward to Mr. Nicholson. And if you want it, write to the Canadian Free Speech League at Box 101, 255 Menzies Street, Victoria, BC, V8V2G6. And we will send you a copy of the petition that you can circulate among your friends and get many more people to tell Mr. Nicholson we don't need him looking after our thoughts, opinions, and beliefs. Thank you.